place your faith in something is to place your allegiance in something. Therefore, giving something our allegiance, which is the obligations to be subservient towards any type of governing state. It is our devotion and our loyalty. So when we are placing our faith in something, we are placing it as above us, admitting to being subservient to the power that it has over us. That just got deep even for me. When we understand the words and the actions that we're conducting our lives with, it really starts to beg the question, where is your allegiance and who do you work for?
Welcome to the Sound Body Initiative, a place for those who sense there's something deeper happening beneath the surface, and where lived experience meets between sound, body, and soul. Here we're talking creativity, consciousness, and real life inquiry, exploring what it actually means to be human right now. So slow down, tune in, and remember how connected we really are.
Beautiful soul, beautiful face, beautiful creatures. So excited to be here with you again. And, you know, I gotta be real. I did not know if I was going to speak on this topic. It's actually had me kind of in a standstill for a couple of days. If you are like a diehard out here, then you know that I'm releasing this week's broadcasts late because I really had to sit with this and I really had to percolate on it because, you know, in my mind, I'm like, well, how does this really relate to my audience? Like, I think a lot about a lot of things. And does that mean every single thing that crosses my mind is relevant to you? Maybe not. But for some reason, this has really been on my heart. And I just want to share my personal journey in hopes that it may help others. Perhaps you are also thinking about this, and believe it or not, you know, what we put our faith in, what we give our power to, essentially plays a big part in how we serve the world as conscious leaders, as conscious creatives, and conscious entrepreneurs. And it really needed to sort of click in my mind to understand why I felt like this message was so important to bring to you. So once that clicked, I could finally understand why this has been so heavy on my heart. And, you know, we live in a world where a lot of things want to take our power. Whatever holds our attention, it holds our faith. And much of those things that we place our faith in, or we put our attention in, or we put our beliefs in, are false narratives, false vessels, false beliefs that essentially serve an ego-based, self-serving reality, you know. And so that's really what this is all about. It's this kind of like a way to keep ourselves in check as creators so that we are leading from a place of integrity, from a place of alignment and honesty, and goodness. So, you know, this might be a triggering conversation for a lot of people because culture and dogmatic religion has really pushed people away and caused a lot of friction between us and our divinity. So if that happens to be you, I really just want to invite you to, you know, take a look at those triggers and maybe with a little curiosity ask, what belief am I holding that causes this to feel like a threat? Because faith or talking about divinity or talking about anyone else's beliefs shouldn't really be threatening to someone who truly knows the power in which they reside, right? So my goal here isn't to trigger people. My goal here is just to ask honest questions, you know, and really provide what I believe or what I feel to be true from, like the show says, a grounded real life perspective, a place of neutrality and a place of honesty. So, I want to look at this from multiple angles because I have been on all sides. I know that most of us are pretty secular in our views, but for me, what it all comes down to is really quite simple. So let's cut out the bullshit and return to our divinity as conscious beings. So this isn't a conversation about which book or which deity you should follow, but rather a conversation on perspective and the simple nature of the universe so that you and I can use our conscious awareness to, really be discerning of where it is that we put our power and where we keep our faith. So, what kind of got me thinking about this topic was my last episode. We talked about the science behind manifestation principles and the law of attraction, which is essentially coherence, which is essentially waveforms coming into synchronicity with one another and being able to amplify in those harmonious states. So a lot of people talk about manifestation and law of attraction and coherence and all these things, but they completely negate to touch on the very foundation of what all of that exists on in the first place. And to me, that is God. To me, that is source consciousness, our divinity. It is the one place where our true power lies, the thing that differentiates whether our intentions are coming from a place of ego and self-serving or whether they're serving the greater collective. So true power lies in the true power that lies behind those scientific and spiritual principles is what we are trying to align with in the first place. And for me, that is our divinity. So that's what got me thinking about this whole topic in the first place, because I want to be very clear that we're not really here to think and feel a certain way and get what we want. A lot of people hear this law of attraction shit and they think it's about getting what they want. But really, it's about being in alignment with the greater whole. So when we are in most alignment is when we are in alignment with the greater whole, with the creation of all things. And to me, that is God. And listen, if you don't like the word God and it makes you feel sort of cringy when you hear it or when you say it, hear me out, because I used to feel that way too. I used to feel like I was, offending people when I say it, or I was, putting some kind of power in this make-believe, deity, so to speak. But, frankly, the more that I looked into it, I actually came to realize that it's not a thing, it's actually a vibration. So I realized that the word God, and the reason that, culture and dogmatic religions and oppressive beliefs, they've pushed us away from using this word. But in doing so, they've actually pushed us away from our divinity, because the word God is actually a vowel sound, the vowel sound of ah. So when you use words like God, like Yahweh, you are actually connecting with a vibration that is the vibration of creation. So words are powerful. And once I realized that the word, once I realized that the word God was actually a vowel sound that was coming from my heart, because the vowel sound ah is also connected to the energetic center, the energetic point of our heart. But we are actually summoning, we are actually creating and becoming one with that source vibration of ah. So once I realized that, I use the word God freely all the time. It's actually one of my favorite words in the vocabulary, because that is the vibration that I want to be connected to. Essentially, coming back to the topic of this episode is what is faith? Finding our faith, reconnecting with our divinity as conscious creators. Okay, so what is faith? You guys know that I love my definitions. and I like to be very clear about the words that I'm using. So I looked up the definition, and this is what it is. It's a noun. This part might be obvious. That which is believed on any subject, whether science, politics, or religion. It's also a creed or belief of a society or group of people. This particular part of the definition, though, I found to be very interesting. It is the fidelity to one's promises or the allegiance to duty to a person honored or beloved. Speaking loyalty. So to place your faith in something is to place your allegiance in something. Therefore, giving something our allegiance, which is the obligations to be subservient towards any type of governing state. It is our devotion and our loyalty. So when we are placing our faith in something, we are placing it as above us, admitting to being subservient to the power that it has over us. That just got deep even for me. So, like, when we understand the words and the actions that we're conducting our lives with, it really starts to beg the question, where is your allegiance and who do you work for? It's interesting, the word work actually has roots to worship or to show worthiness. And this is why I find this topic matter as being so important for conscious creators. So this is why it is imperative for the work that you do to be aligned, because it is what you are placing your allegiance to. It is what you are showing worthiness of. And it is essentially what you are worshiping. Okay? So you can see, as entrepreneurs, as creatives, you can start to understand why it is important to where we place our faith, where we place our power and our allegiance to. So let's talk importance. Why is God above all else? And what even is God? These are the thoughts that go on through my mind, and I'm sure they do for yours too. So, first of all, God is not a deity in the sky. For me, my closest comparison to what God is, and the best way that I can explain this, is the space between. Because it is the space that exists within all of the cells and structures of our body, and it is the space that surrounds us all. So some might call that nothing, but it is the conduit from which all matter is communicated and created within. So for me personally, there is no power greater than that from which I came. The Tao says that the way is in all things. The way goes by many names, yet it has no name. So this begs the question again, where do you place your power? Why are you capable of doing breath work? Why are you capable of meditation? Why are you capable of thinking creatively? It is because of the thing from which you came. It's not you. You're not here to conduct your free will. Yes, we are co-creators, but you manifested out of nothing. You manifested out of the divine grace of God. And so your desires, your thoughts, your intentions, the only reason that they exist is by the very divine intelligence that manifests through you. It is not you. Yet you are it. I think, right? I don't know. I've always questioned everything from a very young age, and even as the words come out of my mouth, I question them. So I fully reserve the right to change my mind on anything that I ever say, ever, just as you have the right to change your mind on anything that you think or feel ever. Because honestly, I've changed my mind several times about the idea of God. And so this is just my personal journey and my personal beliefs surrounding our existence as human beings. So, being from and coming from a place where I've changed my mind about this a lot, and just through the years come to gain deeper and deeper understanding and awareness of this, I've noticed that the entire spiritual community is convincing people that they are the ones that are in control of anything and everything. It is all about what I think, what I want, what I desire. And ultimately, that is doing nothing but serving your ego consciousness. That's doing nothing but serving something that is creating separateness from you and God. Because when you are separate from that divinity, when you are separate from the source of creation, you are no longer in harmony with it, right? And I fully believe that a lot of this friction has to do with the way that modern religion has pushed people away, but now New Age spirituality is just creating the same karmic loops. These are loops, thought patterns, thought forms where people are constantly placing their energy in something outside of themselves, outside of God, repeating patterns and essentially continuing to feed energetic systems of oppression. And I think that's another reason that this is such a big topic on my heart, because I understand that creatives, that people who start businesses, people who are leading groups of people, there is a duty that we have to come from a place of dignity, come from a place of truth. And, to me, this is just part of it. Like, yes, we are capable of free will. Therefore, we have a hand in co-creating our reality, but the grand scheme of things is that you nor I would have that free will if it were not for the grace of God, if it were not for the divinity that manifests from the conduit of nothingness. Like, what is that? You can't even call it anything. So, to be frank, none of our manifestations and our desires even matter at all if they're not in unison and in harmony with the creation of all things. So if you don't have a sense of unified oneness with the creator, with divine source, then all of your experiences, all the people in your life are essentially disconnected from source. And maybe I kind of already said that, but essentially, this is the principle of unified oneness, for which we need to be in harmony with. If we truly want to live our purpose, if we truly want to be in alignment with that which we came here to do. And I actually have a guided sound meditation. It's a 3-part series that I did with a friend of mine in Pittsburgh, Elizabeth White. We did guided meditation using sound with the assistance of plant medicine. And essentially, the first part of that series is the evolution of oneness. And you can listen to that series for free on my YouTube channel at the Sound Body Initiative. It's very interesting. It's actually more of a guided contemplation, as I like to say, because these are sort of all just like trains of thought that I jot down and eventually ramble on about. But anyway, back to the story here. I think there's a lot to be said in the fact that people cry when they come back to God again. I cried when I came back to God again because it was so simple and so profound and so beautiful, because suddenly you just feel this like intense relief of letting go of this separation. And people use psychedelics so that they can feel this sense of unified oneness. But when you realize that that sense of unified oneness is so simple, and it's right in front of you and right inside of you and right surrounding and holding you. It's really quite profound. And, I think that it's essentially, between our divinity and our ego, it's like this balance that pulls us in and out of this connection with source. And a lot of this human journey is about remembering. They say we forget when we come here. And I think that part of the reason that we forget is because the discovery of the divine is so beautiful and amazing that that's part of the human experience. So if you are lost on this path to coming back to God, I just want to say that there is nothing more beautiful than finding your way back to that place. So if you are depressed or if you feel lost, just know that that is one part of the most beautiful story you will ever experience in your life. And I say this because I've been there. And so I know there's light on the other side. But back to the story. So, that is the way that I felt when I came back to God. It was such a relief. It was like this weight came off of my shoulders that I could stop searching. From the age of, like, I would say 12 until I was really in my mid to late 30s, I searched. I literally, I read so many books on different spiritual practices. I did different spiritual practices. I prayed to different deities. And I actually did an episode, Returning to Source. So it's part 2 of my disillusionment series about, how when we are always searching, we're always looking outside of ourselves. But it is returning to source, returning to what is within and what is without. That is the remembrance. And ultimately, that's what brought me back to God, the simplicity of it. Because if you've been listening, you know that I'm all about simplicity and efficiency. And God is simple. Like, our divinity is simple. Toxic religion and dogmatic ideologies have pushed people away from God, and now they've started outsourcing it. Okay. And so this is what I was doing for many, many years. I was outsourcing my divinity. I was looking for God in everything else besides realizing that it is already within me. Okay, so coming back to our simplicity and the efficiency, it's like, and I can understand why people seek outside of themselves. This is the reason that I was seeking outside of myself for God, because of dogmatic religion. I never thought it made sense that there was some creature in the sky judging me on my actions, deciding whether or not I would spend all of eternity in heaven or hell. From a very early age, never made sense to me. It never made sense to me why they would hang the crucifixion inside of churches for children to stare at this really rather morbid and horrifying scene that I used to bawl my eyes out when I was little. So I can totally understand how that type of religious culture and those dogmatic views pushed people away from source. And to be frank, the religions and the cultures that were representing that in the first place really weren't of source to begin with. Those are egoic, self-serving, man-made ideologies of what they think divinity is and how mankind should serve that divinity, which is really what they're thinking is under their control. So, long story short, that's why I pushed God away. That's why I started seeking elsewhere. And, I say it when I refer to God because, quite frankly, I don't like the idea of placing a gender on something that is so neutral as nothing. But, from a scientific perspective, I would lean more towards God being feminine rather than masculine energy. Even though, like, for a while, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, like creation is masculine energy because it must push forward in order to create something. But when you look at it scientifically, everything comes from the void. Everything comes from nothing. That is the womb of creation. And so these days, I lean a little bit more towards, God is feminine in nature, just like nature is feminine. So, but that's neither here nor there when you are trying to describe that which cannot be named. So my return to source was really simple yet profound. And what kind of triggered the conversation, this is a conversation that is going on a lot right now. There's a lot of people coming out of the woo-woo space and returning to Christ, and there's a lot of people leaving the religious space and turning woo-woo. And so I'm very neutral and very grounded, but I heard someone say that yoga was demonic. And I was like, what? Like, I don't understand that. And because I'm always questioning, I'm like, okay, well, I want to understand that way of thinking. I want to, because I believe that there's a little bit of truth in everything. From that perspective, the idea is that things like yoga or things like witchcraft are demonic because it calls upon and embodies deities that they possess. So yoga calls upon different deities in which it represents, in which the poses represent. Okay, so I was like, really, is this evil? Like, I don't know that I believe good versus evil, because I believe everything is held and encapsulated in the divine presence of God. So how could anything that is of God be evil? But I think that humans have the ability to remove themselves from God. And so the more that you outsource your power to anything but the simplicity of divine creation, you're opening up the doorway to deception. And this is where people find that entities, quote unquote, are attached to them, whether they are benevolent or not. And again, this is kind of going back to, well, everything is a reflection of self, everything is a reflection of the whole, so if there is something that is demonic in nature that is controlling you, that is because that is a part of you that you are outsourcing your power to, because, what really is a demon? A demon is an entity with godlike abilities that is not actually connected to the source of consciousness, a daemon, a deity, So it's something that requires the consciousness of a human being in order to create, in order to function and to have its power. Theoretically, okay? So, but I don't know. I've seen people like talk about demons and say they have had encounters with demons. And to me, that just says, well, the only reason that you can see and experience something like that is because you see and experience that within you. And I think a lot of our culture is demonic because, it's essentially we are feeding our thoughts and feeding our attention and giving so much power to something outside of ourselves. Like, look at the media. The media is demonic. It has a mind of its own, and it has the capability to control the minds of others. I think where you differentiate if something is demonic in nature or not is the fact of what is it serving? Is it serving the greater whole? Is its actions and is its essence actually in harmony with all things? Or is it serving itself? Is it creating friction? Some people call these pendulums, thought forms, because energy, vibration, they all manifest in some form. Just as dis-ease manifests in our bodies, our thoughts, our energies, they take form in the reality around us, just as we did as human beings. So placing power in anything but God is a counterfeit. And so this is where you get the idea that anything besides God is demonic, is a deity, is something that humans have created in place of source consciousness. So, long story short, that brought me back to God, because I started thinking, like, yeah, why would I place my power, why would I place my beliefs in anything less than? They call it a counterfeit because it looks real, it has similar qualities, but ultimately it is not the original. So it's a knockoff. You know, again, is it good? Is it evil? I don't know. But for me, I'm kind of a purist and I want simplicity. I want integrity. I want the purest of pure. So, to be honest, I think a lot of modern day Christianity is demonic in nature because, again, I never understood praying or worshiping a figure. I never could understand worshiping or praying or asking forgiveness from a saint, which essentially is what Jesus is. But the Catholic Church has many different saints, and we can all see how demonic the Catholic Church is. But, you know, Jesus is not God. Jesus is the representation of a child of God who is so connected to his creator that he set an example by which we ought to love and which we ought to live. But it's an interesting parallel. I just don't use deities, not even Jesus Christ, as my spirit guide, like a lot of Christians do, because, you know, Jesus didn't ask us to worship him. Jesus did not ask us to pray to him. He asked us to follow him in reverence to the one true infinite creator. So for me, it's simple. Why go to anything less than the original? But that's just me. So back to the story. You know, I think contemplating these things is very healthy for anyone that's living in this modern society, because our society, our culture, even new age spirituality, it's all pointing to something that is man-made, essentially. For example, like, I used to get really into Egyptian gods and goddesses and hieroglyphs and, you know, this whole thing with all the deities. But, like, those deities were manifestations of the imagination of essentially elites who decided that society would pay homage and put their faith, put their allegiance into man-made thought forms. So that's where my whole understanding of this comes from, and why it's important as a leader, as a conscious creative, as somebody who is creating either business or art in this world, to have a strong connection to the divine, because you are either placing your heart and soul, you are either aligning with that which is in harmony with all things, or you are working for a man-made entity. You know, you do the math there. So yes, new age spirituality, yes, like these different religions, they're searching for meaning. We're in this modern culture where we have been removed from God. We've been removed from our divinity for as long as we have been writing about our history as human beings. And, you know, essentially we're here in this time space trying to undo the conditions of generational programming that has gotten us so detached in the first place. So I can understand why people are outsourcing their divinity to things like crystals and constellations. However, there is nothing more powerful than God. There is nothing more powerful than the divinity, the conduit from which all things are created and which resides in all things. You know what I mean? So that's why it's simple. That's why, for me, I don't pledge my allegiance to anything outside of that, because this whole idea of placing your power in something, it's very dogmatic. You know, do this and that will happen. Don't do this or that will happen. You know, it's the same as the Old Testament. It's requiring of sacrifice. Just like the Old Testament required blood sacrifice, mutilation to the body, like circumcision, and all of these other tidings just to be let into the kingdom of God. But these are dogmatic beliefs and rituals that essentially, those things push people away from the one true nature of God in the first place. Yet now we find people doing that again in New Age spirituality and all this woo-woo shit. And I'm not talking about science, because science is the observation of God, but I'm talking about praying to fucking crystals and putting on fucking masks and fucking face paint and calling yourself a god or a goddess. Like, you are just part of the creation. The tree does not believe that they are any more or any less than the rock or the mountain. They are just part of the fabric that connects all things. They are just part of the one greater painting and picture. So it's a fucking rat race, is what I'm saying. It's this chasing, this constant searching and chasing for conditions, and it removes the concept of grace. And what is grace but to be given privileges without condition? It is a favor that's rendered to one without the need to do so. It is literally the act of unconditional love. And that's what we have through the divine as children of God. So back to the whole inception of this thought process, this rabbit hole that I've taken you down along with me. Thank you, and you're welcome. Back to the inception of this thought process, which was entrainment of reality and a vibrational alignment. So science is the observation of God's creation. It is not the reason of why we should do, but it's rather the cause of our innate design, our divine intelligence. So it's not a matter of having your mind and your heart aligned with your own will or the will of another, but it is becoming in vibrational alignment with the harmony and wholeness of all things. Nature provides us with everything that we need, because in nature we see the true harmony of God's presence, detached from the egos of men, in complete unity. And it's when we align our free will with this creation is where we discover the true divinity within us. So, with that, I hope that this helps you to find true devotion and true vibrational alignment with that which you came here to do. Not for self-seeking, not for self-accomplishment, but to serve the greater collective by being at unity and harmony within your vessel and within the vessel that surrounds us all. Of course, if you want to activate your somatic memory around all of that to the goodwill of all, check out this week's Sound Body Radio. It is a collection of tracks that remind me just a little bit of heaven here on earth. So, from one light to another, keep up the good work. You're doing great.
What's up, conscious creator? If you're ready to give back to your body in the same way that it gives back to you, I highly recommend checking out my website at sound-body.org, where you can find more music resources and integrative products that increase your capacity for living well. And if you love to dance and you're ready to receive these transmissions through your own sound body, don't forget to listen to this week's mix at Sound Body Radio. You can find me on YouTube at JRio Music or SoundCloud at Jessica Rio Music, or simply by searching Sound Body Radio. As always, your support doesn't just feed me as an independent creator, but it helps those around you find their path back to their higher calling. So, thanks for listening, and remember, keep up the light.